to our part 2 of 2 council meetings that we broke up. I'm going to ask Councillor Wharehinga to open with Karakia for us. Thank you.
Te whānau mīnoi tata. A tīramarama nuku tīramarama rangi ko koe kai pauri te ngāka o tangata, kia māwete wete te ngāka o tangata. Tērā te tūwhiri ka tūwhiri, tērā te tīramarama ka tīramarama. I koia te mahara, tangohi e te atamai, hei pau tūwhiri mau, hei pau kōrero mau, hei pau atamai. Tūturu whiti whakamaua kia tīna, umi e hui e,
Yeah. Thank you for that. Before we start, Councillor Tupara asked if he could address council, so the floor is yours. Good morning.
Tūwai ki te mihi ki te whare me ngā kaupapa o te rānei. A koe te tuakana mo tō kupu Karakia e tīmata tāsa nei hui tēnā koe. I was thinking, it was suggested that I should make some statement given the recent events that have occurred in the last few weeks over the last month. And to that effect, certainly the value of our Māori wards in the Tairāwhiti are as taonga, and as such have a profound significance, embodying the principles of partnership, representation and empowerment in Te Tini Tō Waitangi. Our Māori wards enrich the whāriki of local governance, ensuring that iwi Māori, hapu and whānau voices are heard and considered in shaping their rohe. As such, the mana of the Māori wards is an important mechanism for inclusion and is pivotal in forging a future where all participate in our prosperity and cultural heritage. The value of Māori wards extends beyond mere political representation, requiring manaakitanga and tiakitanga, which is at the very heart of what it means to honour a shared past while building a more equitable and cohesive future. I do wholeheartedly support my fellow Māori ward colleagues in all their efforts and directions, and the directions expressed by our iwi, hapu and whānau. To this end, any thought that I might at this point or any other point during this term of council voluntarily step down is truly exaggerated. I intend to stay, lend a shoulder to the whole of council for the betterment and the advancement of our community. Anō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou, mauri ora tātou katoa.
Ka poe poe a au I te po mai no e te koro wai o te atu aku whare oki oki. Te rā whetū koriko riko, te maramatai aho aho. Hei hua moku I te potaku, whare oki oki.
Anō reira, kia ora tata katoa.
Okay, councillors, we have in front of us 3 lovely faces, which there are more than 3 lovely faces. We've got our 3 beautiful wahine zooming in today from Potaka, from Ruatoria, and Councillor Tibble all the way from Rotorua, not Ruatoria. Welcome to our council meeting. And we have Ariana and Jean there as well. I think you are gorgeous too, but I just wanted to acknowledge the councillors who are joining us via audio-visual today. Do I have any other apologies to note, councillors? No? Thank you for that. Do we have any declarations of interest? No? Then we have no minutes because we covered it last week, because remember this is part 2 of one big council meeting, and then the action register and governance plan are exactly the same, so I'm not going to spend time on them. We do not have leave of absence. Any person that wanted to do acknowledgement, anyone passed away or that we need to acknowledge that I'm not aware of? It doesn't look like that. Public input and petitions. Okay, that's in public excluded. No extraordinary business. No notices of motion. No adjourned business. So councillors, you will see what we have got on our agenda today. Even though agenda is huge, it is absolutely huge. It is 3 chunky bits and then with some chucked in some freshwater planning in the middle. So let's start on page 9. Our first discussion today is approval to consult on our navigation safety bylaw. And I do invite our Harbour Master if he will join us. For any technical questions, good morning, Mr. Buell. Who is going to open this up? And then we will open it for any questions or queries. But councillors, I want you to take into account, morning Joe, this is a process that we are following to get to a process. This is not us agreeing or disagreeing as such with proposals. This is us listening to what staff are proposing and moving on to then get input from the public who this ultimately need to serve. So Joe, I'm going to pass over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I'll take the paper as read. We do have Makarand and Charlotte here, as well as the Harbour Master, to answer any more of the detailed questions. So this process was started back in 2022. It's been a bit delayed by the cyclone, but we're coming back finally for approval to consult on changes to our navigation safety bylaw. So this is the bylaw that, as it says, looks after navigational safety both in the coastal marine area and the navigable rivers in the region. So the key proposals are listed there on page 10. I won't go through them all, but those are the things that we'll be consulting the wider public about. There has been some targeted engagement already, and also discussions with Maritime New Zealand, who have that overarching responsibility for maritime safety in New Zealand. And I think those are the key points, and we'll open up for questions.
Councillor Thompson and then Councillor Wharenga and then Councillor Ria.
So I've got 2 questions. First question on 31, in terms of extending the bylaw coverage to the whole area. The majority of people weren't in favour of doing this, but it seems every comment, there's only comments telling us why it's a good idea. I'd be interested in, actually more interested in the reasons why they don't want this to happen.
What are you referring to on page?
So it's got the online comments, so every comment they got is supporting it. I'm actually interested in the reasons why people don't support it, not sort of backing up what we're wanting to do. I'm more interested in the reasons why people don't want it to happen, especially when the majority of people don't want it to happen.
Thank you, Charlotte.
Yep, so I can briefly answer that. So with that survey, people weren't required to give a comment, so that was the only comment that we got. So in terms of their reasons why they didn't support it, we don't necessarily have those through that survey because they weren't required to give a reason.
Okay, so there's only, out of all the comments,
What that
yes
one
or no's,
comment
there's
is the
actually
only
one
reason
comment.
yeah, in relation to that specific issue.
Thank you. And then moving on to page 61, I think the biggest problem we've got, and it's always in the limelight, is is people swimming at the boat ramp. It seems to come up all the time, and yeah, it's like the biggest problem that we've really got. It's like it's not being addressed. It would be good to try and tighten this up and resolve it now, otherwise we have to wait another 5 years and then not until 10 years after that again. So I think this is an opportunity to tighten up our bylaw on that and resolve the issue that, so, in terms of our public, seems to be the biggest issue.
Thank you for that, Councillor Thompson. Next, Councillor Wharehinga, thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I would like to just take us to page 21. That's where my first thing is. Actually, first, I'm happy to move this paper because, you know, like it is part of our process of engaging with our community around officially discussing the bylaw, so I'm happy to move it. Just a couple of things that I'd like to comment on in regards to page 21, this part around, I guess, I understand in terms of the sensible nature of it, that you'd want people to be wearing coloured swimming caps and things like that. I don't necessarily think that needs to be part of a bylaw and more of a best practice recommendation kind of thing, just going forward in terms of our engagement. It's the same way I feel in regards to swimming at the boat ramp as well. There's some things that, you know, if our engagement can also have that conversation with our community as well, that some things, your feedback could necessarily not have to be part of the bylaw. It could be something that kind of sits at the side of it in terms of what we think that, you know, do you think that these should be best practice recommendations? And then on page 23, in regards to the Waiapu River speed limit, and I'm sure you guys are going to do this already, it links to the comments of 35 and 36. It's just to consult and connect in with the Waiapu River users in regards to that kaupapa. So more than happy to move the support, Your Worship.
Okay, Councillor Ria.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I did have a few questions. The first is probably to our Harbour Master. To ensure that there's a connection between what's proposed here in the document and at a governance level, and so, for example, which Councillor Thompson has already brought up, the widening of the scope for enforcing rules across all waterways within Te Tairāwhiti. I would really like an honest opinion on whether the recommendations are enforceable with the current operational team, and if it actually may be a bit of a stretch to expect that the Harbour Master is going to be able to cover such a large area, because then if we're not able to cover such a large area, why are we putting money into changing a bylaw when actually operationally we can't achieve what we're setting the bylaw in place for, because we do have to go through the administration and all the other tasks. So that was my first question.
Yep, so let's get a response to that first. Mr. Buell.
I have no intention of going 12 nautical miles off East Cape to enforce the life jacket rule. However, the bylaw, by bringing it in line with our district, it also enables me to do things with big ships. So, for example, it makes it much easier for me to enforce a change of fuels outside our territorial waters, so that when they try and come in harbor, they don't have an engine failure, because most engine failures happen shortly after they switch from seagoing heavy fuels to the lighter fuels that they have to use in our areas. So it's more about the ability to enforce that side of things than it is the life jacket rule. To be fair, I've never seen anybody leave our area without a life jacket, because it's 500 meters from being out in the middle of it here, so people are very good about that. So said, I'm not going out to enforce that, but it makes it much easier and brings both the MTA and our bylaw in line to enforce things for things that I can do not necessarily out on the water. I can do it from here, but it makes it easier for me to enforce those.
Thank you. I appreciate that response. I suppose now my concern is, once it's put in the bylaws, that it could still affect recreational fishers when the intention is specifically for larger vessels. So I just want to put that out.
Mr. Buell wants to respond.
Oh, yes.
So right now, it doesn't change anything for recreational fishers. What it means for recreational fishers, if we did happen to have an issue with them not having life jackets, is it can be enforced under a bylaw rather than the MTA. So they have to have their life jackets, whether it's our bylaw or the MTA. But again, it's much easier and more straightforward using a bylaw than going through the Maritime Transport Act.
Thank you. Just in terms of the life jackets, I thought that it would be helpful when we put it out for public submission that there are photo examples of the requirement. I followed the links through to the MTA bylaws, and there's not even photo examples of those. They have life jacket 400 something something, life jacket 430 something something something, life jacket, and so there's these 5 different kinds of life jackets. But in order for our community to be able to understand and engage, that some examples maybe could be given. Also, in terms of the prohibited anchorage around the area shoreward of Ariel Bank, there was no sort of map to kind of say where that area was. I took it to believe that it was the area between Ariel Reef and the shore, but I could possibly be wrong. Can I get some clarification on that?
Can you just refer them to what page you are referring to? Charlotte is paging furiously through her computer.
Sorry.
26 and 44.
Sorry, what did you say it was, Tony?
26 and 44 have references to Ariel.
Speak up.
26 and 44 have got references to Ariel.
26 and 44.
On page 3, Your Worship, page 87.
Or 87 is the last one.
I believe there's a map.
There's a map.
I didn't see it.
I've seen you on Vanessa.
Oh, cool. And my other part was around that it was against, so is this rule also for larger boats? How does it relate to recreational fishers who anchor around Ariel Reef for recreational fishing? And if it does include recreational fishers who anchor, because I'm one of those recreational fishers, and if it includes me not being able to anchor in that area, does commercial cray pots who are also used in that area, who also have an environmental impact, are the restrictions also placed because of environmental impacts on commercial cray pots as well as anchors? Kia ora.
Thank you, Mr. Buell. Thank you, Charlotte.
So the prohibited anchorages are for commercial vessels for shipping over 500 tons, which doesn't include any of our pleasure craft and none of our fishermen either. The reason that area was added was it's poor holding ground. So we've had vessels drag anchors from there. It's the same reason that we reduced the anchorages in the bay to the 3 for ships and 2 for cruise ships. That's a combination of things. One, it was just getting too crowded. We were having quite a few ships backed up for a while, so they now all have to stay out. And the other thing, which is a side benefit, because I'm actually not allowed to do this bylaw for environmental reasons, it's for safe navigation and navigation safety only, but the side benefit of it is that it minimizes the effect on the seabed by having just those specific areas. So that's not why it's there, but it's a side benefit of it. But this is for shipping as opposed to boat.
Thank you so much. That has answered so many of my questions that I had in regards to this paper. Just my last 2 observations were that I was concerned that the tangata whenua engagement, community engagement had kind of been lumped in, so supporting the kōrero from Councillor Wharehinga around iwi and hapu engagement in this paper when it goes out for consultation, like purposeful, specific engagement with them. And finally, I appreciated at our last council hui, when the data came in that was collected from consultation, that it actually said where in the community the data came from. So in this instance as well, I think it would be really beneficial when we move forward to make a decision if we are aware what area of the community who use those waterways or who are within the community use them. So has the feedback come from a recreational boater or fisher, a yachty, a cultural kai collector, a commercial fisher, a cray collector, a swimmer, or a member of the public who doesn't access those waterways? Because like with much of our consultation, these bylaws affect different people in different way. And so I do feel that recognising the users of that space have a voice, that data be shown in the consultation feedback. Kia ora.
Thank you for that. Okay, next I have Councillor Parata, and then Councillor Cranston, and then Councillor Alder. Thank you.
Kia ora tātou. I had a couple of thoughts about this what do you call it? Bylaw, policy. One, I think that it's important to continually look at ways in which we can keep whānau users of our moana and boats and in our waterways, keep them safe. So I think some of the suggestions are practical in nature. My main thoughts was in regards to the speed limits in the Waiapu River. I'd be very interested in what the people in the community and users of that particular waterway feel about that particular proposed change. I mean, from the outset, it seems pretty practical, but I'd be very interested in hearing what the people have to say, and for council to be very open to what that might be. And then, yeah, secondly, just supporting what my fellow councillors have said about engagement with tangata whenua, particularly ngā hapu o ngā rohe moana o Ngāti Porou. It'd be really good to get a submission and a meaningful engagement with them about what they feel about those specific changes. Other than that, I'm actually happy to move it.
Thank you. So you'll second that because Councillor Wharehinga moved it. Thank you for that, Councillor Parata, and thank you for your comments as well. Charlotte is nodding away. Mr. Buell is nodding away. So that is good. You won't be able to see them on camera. Okay, thank you for that. I move on to Councillor Cranston and then Councillor Alder. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. The first question was sort of alluded to with Councillor Rea's question. I was just trying to get my head around the difference between harbour limits and what is actually the jurisdiction that you work under. I know we've got a lot of issues that come through Tarapuri, and we had that big ship that was coming in towards Wainui. So when we see the map on page 83, which has got the harbour limits, is that just Anchorage? I think I heard possibly. But where is your jurisdiction sort of in totality? So.
My jurisdiction goes out to 12 nautical miles throughout the entire district. The harbour limit and the pilotage limit is the other one that's on that one as well, are two closer ones, but that work specifically for Gisborne. But I'm the Gisborne District Harbour Council Harbour Master, not just the Gisborne City Harbour Master.
No, that's fine. The other thing was with the exclusion for recreational sporting and events. Is that exclusion also for training, or is that just for the actual event, this life jacket exclusion?
So for most sports, it'll depend on how you're doing your training. If you have a support boat that can collect people that fall into the water, then you can operate without the life jacket in the boat. But if you're operating on your own, you're a single paddler, or you're one boat and you've got no support boat, you have to have life jackets.
And the last thing's probably not your department, but I was concerned about the toilet damage down there. I just wondered what that was and whether it's been addressed, whether it was serious or a lot of money already in that toilet without having damage.
The toilets, wharepaku.
I think that was outdated, eh? Because I've been there since, and it's because this consultation happened a while ago. Like it's that feedback is outdated.
Yeah, and my question was to staff about whether it's going to be an ongoing thing we have to address, or you know, what is happening down there, that they're wrecking a beautiful $1 million toilet.
Sorry. First time it's come to my attention, I'll have to get some background on that.
All
So
right,
we'll
thank
get
you.
back to you, Councillor Cranston.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you for that. Councillor Alder, thank you, and then Councillor Tupara.
Yeah, no, it sounds good, happy with it. One would be interested in what the cost of going to the public with something like this is. Secondly, a comment around speed limits on graded rivers. That speed limit would exclude jet boats and therefore any kind of jet boat. You can't negotiate a river like that at low speeds of a jet boat. And third comment about swimmers at the port. Council staff told jumpers to go and jump off the bridge back in the summer, where the bridge was handled with stakes. The port, at certain times of the year, is a very safe place to jump from that perspective, and whether we should look at trying to section off an area for all of those jumpers, because they're going to break the rules anyway, as we've seen, and whether the way around this is to give them an area that is safe. Thank you.
Sorry, can I just clarify through Worship, did you make the statement that council staff encouraged?
That's what he's saying.
Because that's not the case at all. Want to be clear, we've put up signage so that they do not jump off the bridge because of the dangers. We're very aware of
Okay, so this was before the signs went up, and I went to stop the kids from jumping off the bridge, and they pointed in the direction of the wharf and said, people in the yellow coats at the wharf told us to go and jump off the bridge and not in the harbour.
that wouldn't be our council officers.
Anyway, I wanted to make a comment, Councillor Alder. We did create a space on the other side with a ladder to climb out when kids were jumping off the road. This is before we had issues with, you know, floating objects, and this is why the new signage go. And we have forever discussed, and we know there are so many hooks if you do that with legislation, like you need lifeguards there. If you create a specific space, I know in the Hawke's Bay and areas, even if they do stuff on lakes. So it is very complex. We have dug into it quite a few times. I'm not saying we shouldn't again, but we have dug into it quite a few times before as well to see where there are safe spaces. At this stage, we're dealing with some underwater hazards that no one knows what's floating down the river. So I just wanted to acknowledge we have done stuff before, but I'm not saying we won't have those discussions going forward too. Next is Councillor Tupara. Thank you, Councillor Tupara.
Thank you, Worship. Just picking up on Councillor Thompson's point about discussion around the swimmers at the wharf, whether or not there was a consideration in the planning for consultation to directly engage with those swimmers. They seem to be the type of group that would miss the usual engagement mechanisms that apply to this type of consultation, and given that they gather at a very specific place at specific times, that might be an opportunity to seek their input into their activities there. From a broader perspective, I'm wondering if there's potential to have included in consultation documents some of the tipuna cultural safety practices that are in place around our waterways. Certainly safety has always been a major consideration for our iwi and our hapu and our whānau as frequent users of those areas, and there are cultural mechanisms that help assist in that safety. Things like rāhui on particular areas from time to time on particular reefs in Kuatu, and even seasonal practice. That is a traditional cultural mechanism to help keep everybody safe, but also to safeguard some of the impacts that might adversely apply to some of those practices. In the maps I see that some traditional names are being used for some places and some reefs. Be useful, I think, to identify the traditional names for some of those reefs, which makes it more intimately connected to our community, particularly the Māori community, when it comes to consultation. And so that there can be no mistake what area, what reef one is talking about, that both the cultural name and the more contemporary reference are both there. And just to ensure that during consultation, people are quite specific about where they have their issues. So just for clarity, thank you.
Okay, do I have any other questions? Charlotte, you got the feedback you needed to go forward. We have recommendations, councillors, on page 11. I have a mover in Councillor Wharehinga. I have a seconder in Councillor Parata. If there are no other feedback, we acknowledge that a bylaw is the most appropriate means to move forward. We determine that our proposed bylaw is the most appropriate form and it doesn't impinge on the Bill of Rights, and then we are saying we will take this forward for consultation to hear back from the community. All in favour? Aye. Contrary? Carried. Thank you for that, and councillors, thank you for your feedback. Next, I move you to our Cemeteries in Crematoria bylaw review, which is page 93.
Your Worship, so we will again take the paper as read. This is the very start of another bylaw process, the Cemeteries and Crematoria bylaw. So this is another bylaw that's reaching the end of its prescribed life under the legislation, so we need to commence a review. We've done some initial analysis of what may be some areas where we look at changes to the bylaw, so there's nothing confirmed yet, but we're just introducing that initial analysis, those initial findings to you before the staff then, assuming you endorse the review, go and prepare a more fulsome package of information and a consultation document and statement of proposal. So we are recommending that we do keep the bylaw, but that there may be some room for some changes to be made, and those are outlined in the report. And in this, the executive summary gives a little list of the focus areas that interesting topics in there.
Yes, and I remember last time when we did this, it's really a sensitive topic as well. It's really, really sensitive because it affects people's lives every day, and I want to commend staff for how they went forward last time, listened to consultation and feedback, and there are some stuff in here which changed then about, newborn stillborn babies from out of region, just being sensitive that it is such a tough time for whānau, and we do want to make it straightforward and easy for people to lay their loved ones to rest in a respectful way. Councillor Foster, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm happy to move it, but I do have a comment, and it's on page 101, number 39 and 40, and it relates to alcohol being consumed at our cemeteries and the inherent bad behaviour, unruly behaviour that is associated with it. And we have no budget to put a no alcohol sign up. And I'm just thinking, what about that? Am I reading this for sure?
What page are you referring to?
101.
101.
Yeah, and it's on number 40 where it says, therefore, however, this is not budgeted for in current operational budgets, and the public places bylaw has no infringement powers. A cemetery is a place of peaceful resting, and it's not a place for partying. You put your loved ones down and you pay your duly respects and then move on. And if you want to have a celebration, you do it in someone else's house, not in a public space at a cemetery when there are other grave sites right next door, or other people breathing at grave sites right next door. So, I think this needs to be addressed right now, like signage, no alcohol, and this is something we need to discuss about possibly all cemeteries, not just at Tarahiru.
Through your worship, so this is to propose that staff go and draft up a bylaw. So taking into consideration all the multiple issues and how we can address it. At the moment, even if you did have a sign, it's not enforceable. The other thing to think about too, as we do when you determine around alcohol bans around town, there are people that do go out there on birthdays and so forth and do have a quiet little drink in terms of the relationship with alcohol that the city has. So it isn't a hard and fast black and white thing here. Budget isn't the restriction for me. It's about their actual ability to enforce this.
But thank you for that feedback. And I agree wholeheartedly with you about the cemetery as a respectful place.
The other side is, so what we're saying is that people can go out there and drink and have a big party, and we can't do anything about it.
But we can't do anything about it anyway. So through your worship, even if we have a sign up, the ones that are going to have a good party in the cemetery are the ones that are going to not take heed of a sign.
Yep.
Charlotte.
Just to clarify, under 41, it's mentioned around the alcohol bylaws. So we have a suite of bylaws under different legislation. So in terms of talking about and looking at, I guess, new or different restricted areas, that is the specific bylaw where that is addressed and therefore then has the relevant enforcement, etc.
Councillor Wharehinga.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I'm happy to second the paper. First off, Summer, really great paper. It was excellent paper. Thank you very much. In line with what Councillor Foster's kind of the essence of his kōrero, and you've alluded to this, was that there are a few parts in here in this bylaw where they're about creating rules for enforcement and things like that, and it's that fine line right between being able to send a message to our community that these are the things we reasonably expect in a cemetery, and then our ability on the other side to be able to enforce them. I'm really happy where we've got into in regards to this paper, because it's really broad in terms of its information. It states a lot of different things that are issues for our cemetery, things like the use of alcohol in there. I do want to note though that on page 101, under paragraph 39, there's a line in there that says, asking those unruly persons to quiet down for burial proceedings has been successful. You know, so I do just want to note that those ones that may have been doing that, when asked, it looks like, according to staff, that they have quieted down. So also there's the other things too in here that are concerns for me in regards to, as a dog lover myself, people walking their dogs through there and then leaving their dog feces in there. I would contend that that's worse than the other grieving associated alcohol consumption behaviour. So there are lots of different things in there where you go, hey, come on community, let's sharpen up. But what I don't want is for this bylaw to become then the expectation from our community that our staff's going to be running around there handing out $50 fines for dog feces and all of these kinds of things. So I'm looking forward to our engagement, because I'm hoping that will be the feedback that comes back. Again, great paper in terms of its breadth of information in order for our community to have a wider informed discussion. So yes, happy to second this paper.
Thank you for that. I thought I would just, before Councillor Robinson and then Councillor Ria, just reiterate what Councillor Wharehinga just said, just for new councillors. We write bylaws because there are certain requirements of us. It doesn't mean if we write a bylaw that someone's going to sit there and hand out fines. A lot of it is best practice that we expect from our community. 85% of the community are going to respect that. 10% of the community are probably going to never go there, not use it, and 5% of the community might abuse the certain. If there are criminal activity tied up there, the police will enforce that. But for us, bylaws is usually saying to people, this is best practice for us as a community to operate in a civil way, and we ask you please to either self-police or police yourself, and then council staff will react when there are complaints. There are not actively someone sitting there with a little book or cameras trying to catch people. And I think sometimes there's a misunderstanding there that if there's a bylaw, it is just automatically like our alcohol bylaw. We ask people in certain spaces to be respectful. The vast majority of our community are very respectful, but unfortunately we do get the odd one which staff will, and it's the same for noise or dogs, staff will try and deal with it in the way they can, and then if it escalates into something that's criminal, the police, that is their area to step in. So I just want to, with councillors as well, don't set an expectation that if we have a bylaw, that there are staff there sitting or lying in ditches waiting for someone to do something wrong so they can catch them out. That's not how a bylaw works, and it's also not the intent from staff to set that expectation. I'm going to move on to Councillor Robinson and then Councillor Ria.
Thank you, Your Worship. The area that I really want to talk about starts on page 99, and it's guidance on offensive monuments. And I reread it. I went and had a look at the Bill of Rights Act, and the section that this paper talks about in the Bill of Rights Act as providing justified limitations on expression of under the Bill of Rights and offensive insignia on graveheads, tombstones. The section in the Act simply says the rights and freedoms contained in this Bill of Rights may be subject only to such reasonable limits prescribed by law as can be demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. It's about as big a statement as you can say that the Bill of Rights is overriding. It is only ever to be limited in really limited circumstances. So when I read that again, it really refreshed for me just how critical the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act is, and the rationale provided in this report around the insignia and noting that there'd been a court decision around it, I really struggle to put a draft out to the public which proposes to limit insignia or any other symbols in our cemeteries in Tairāwhiti on the basis of that it's an acceptable exception to the Bill of Rights Act. I don't support that. Yes, some people may take offence. Some people may take offence to any number of things. If you're out at a cemetery and you see a symbol on someone's tombstone and you take offence to it, it's a big cemetery. Walk away, be somewhere else. I think it's a slippery slope. It's a thin edge of the wedge, and I don't support that. And I don't want our draft bylaw proposing that. This is the first time this has been brought to us. I don't know if this is the only time we'll have a chance to workshop this, or whether we're going to have a workshop.
It's already in there. We did workshop it.
Through you, Chair, this is just the initial start. We're asking for your endorsement to start the review, and then, as I said, we'll come back with a more fulsome package of what we then go out to the community with. This is the very start of the process. Okay, that's fine then. The other thing was, then that's good. The other thing was that just under the section on page, where is it? Please bear with me. Page 106, paragraph 75, under the heading of tangata whenua engagement. I know this is the start of the process, but I really want to make sure that this process fully, in every way and form, engages with tangata whenua, given that over half our population is tangata whenua, and we may find that our policy and our bylaw is rather colourblind, and the new version could be a whole lot better. So I just really, really want to urge staff to go beyond. I know you do really well, but go beyond in this case, because this is so critically and culturally important for our region. And I know it's the start of the process, just saying. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. So I've got lots of hands. I've got Councillor Ria, I've got Councillor Pahuru Huriwai, I've got Councillor Parata, I've got Councillor Tupara, And I saw some other hand that I just forgot. Okay, let's go. Councillor Ria.
Yes, I do support what Councillor Robertson has just talked about. In particular, page 100.38, the revised bylaw could include a clause clearly defining and prohibiting monuments displaying offensive and intimidating content. I think that offensive and intimidating content varies, like it's quite a grey statement, because things that are intimidating and offensive to some are not intimidating and offensive to others. Personally, I am not offended or intimidated by any gang insignia, and I've never had a negative interaction with a gang member. I would even go as far to say that most of us in this room probably haven't had a negative personal experience with a gang member. I'm not saying everybody, but most of us in this room haven't had that personal experience in the last 5 to 10 years. The fact that gang members exist either sitting in the car on a street or in a confrontation with someone else down the road, or via a memorial commemoration of someone's life or someone's life commitment to that gang, quite frankly, I don't think is anybody else's business. If you hadn't had that personal negative experience, then your perception or your offensive feeling or your feeling of intimidation has come from the media. I can say very honestly and clearly that during COVID, I delivered food packages to houses in Kaiti and in Elgin with patched gang members who volunteered their time to come and do that for the community. But you will not read about that in the front page of the Gisborne Herald, and you will not read about it, and you will not see it on TV. So I do think it's a huge concern for me with the addition of specifically targeting gang insignia on gravestones. I don't think it is I understand profanity, that profanity is something that is extremely offensive to a majority, but removing that gang insignia actually affects hundreds of gang members in our community. We have hundreds of gang members in our community, and I just want all of that to really be considered when putting together the paper for the bylaw to go out for community consultation. Kia ora.
Next on my list is Councillor Pahuruhuriwai, and then Councillor Parata, and then Councillor Tupara. Thank you.
Morena, tātou. From Wharekahika, where it's beautiful and sunny. I just want to tautoko Councillor Ria and her sentiment she's just given. And I guess I wanted to go to page 100 again around the memorial designs as well, and wonder if there's any information given out to whānau about this, about if there was changes to be made in terms of specifications around the design of a memorial headstone, because that planning starts, you know, a couple of 3 or 4 months after the tangi. People start thinking about how are they going to remember their loved one that's gone, and it's too late to require them to make changes to that when they've gone to all the expense of planning for their stone and having it done, and then potentially to be told, oh no, you can't have that because it doesn't fit the requirements. So if we were to go through with something like this, then I would ask that there's really good, and that it comes back from consultation, that is what people want, that there's some good communication, some brochures or something that help whānau understand what is okay to have in the public cemeteries. Of course, on the coast, we don't really have that because we have our own whānau urupa, where there, in a lot of cases, so you know, we don't have those same limitations. But it is a costly exercise for whānau doing unveilings, and you know, that like to have lots of time to think about that. On page 101, I agree, and listening to everybody's comments about the alcohol in the urupa, I agree with the solution that the staff have put forward about including something in the alcohol control bylaw once we have that review, to cover off the situation we're in currently where we can't do anything about it. And I just had a question on page 117 around the grave digging. I see that only the sexton can dig the graves and fill in the graves, but I just wondered, because of course here up on the coast our whānau dig the graves and they also fill the graves. It's a really important part of healing, especially the filling in of the grave. And I just wondered, why is it that whānau are not able to fill in the grave? It's especially healing for our tāne, who have to dig it, but also, you know, for the children, the mokopuna who help to feel that's their final goodbye to their loved one. So I'd like a response to that. And my last comment was about on page 118.8.6.5. If a disinterment is due to the water table being too high, and you know we've had constant issues these past couple of years with Taruheru in particular being closed because of the water table for long periods of time. I heard from one whānau, it was like many months that their loved one was held before they could be buried. And I wonder if whānau decided to disinter the rest of their whānau, to be removed, to take them somewhere else where they wouldn't have this issue in the future, what kind of support would we be able to give them? Because they wouldn't be making those choices or making that as a choice, but they, you know, it's likely that these issues around the weather are not going to change, not going to get any better for our whānau. So those who have had plots paid for, etc., for a long time, what support mechanisms do we have in place should they wish to disinter because of it? So yeah, those are my questions. Tēnā koutou, and I'm happy to support the paper.
Thank you. Ms. Thatcher Swan.
Hopefully I've captured the questions. But the first one I wanted to just make a comment in terms of the headstones. So through the bylaw process, our staff have good relationships with the suppliers of the headstones, whose technical name has just gone out of my head. And so they have an understanding of what the requirements are, right? So if there was going to be an issue around any offensive headstones, there would be a signal, and they would also let whānau know about whether or not they can have them. One of the things that we need to consider as we work through the bylaw is, and we're hearing the comments around gang insignia. Gang insignia doesn't just apply to mongrel mob and black power. It's beyond. So when we think about how we apply the bylaw, it needs to be in a manner where you're not when you're being fair and you're spreading it right across. So once you allow one, you allow all. So I think these are the things that we will bring back and share with you some other experiences that we know councils have had once you've opened up getting display on headstones and the destruction thereof that happens within cemetery sites. The second part, I think the question around digging graves, it's a health and safety issue. The sexton, ultimately I'm responsible for what happens within the cemetery grounds, and you all know how it can be dangerous when digging those graves. So that is the reason why we do not allow others to get on the tools and do that, recognising that there is a healing process, as you've pointed out, but ultimately it comes down to health and safety liability within the council's reserve area. The last question you had was around disinterment, and that's rare when disinterment happens, and there is a big process that you have to go through with the Ministry of Health to undertake that. So if there was a question around whether is it the fee? Yeah.
Waiving the fee?
You wouldn't waive the fees for disinterment, no, because it's a significant process to do that. The water table only affects the burials of bodies, not those that are already buried.
I think the question was if you couldn't bury a new family member with their whānau, then you may want to uplift all the existing buried whānau.
No, oh yeah, no. So was that the question, Councillor? Can you repeat it again, sorry?
Yeah, that was the gist of it. So, you know, for whānau that have had the experience of not being able to bury their loved one for some time, I don't know, you know, if this is happening, but it just occurred to me. And then they decided, well, actually, if this is going to happen a lot, let's find somewhere else to take our whānau to. And then they decided that they would, you know, uplift, you know, whoever, a couple of others that might be in their plot, and move them somewhere else. I don't know. But yeah, that was the question, is what support mechanisms might there be? I understand that it's not done, it hasn't been done, you know, it's very rare, but with the problems that we're having with the water table, it might become more of a issue for whānau, maybe?
Yeah, through your worship. So I've, in my life at council, have never come across that. The only time when there was consideration around disinterment of Te Pāpaka was when there was potential for the urupa to slip into the sea, but fortunately we were able to remedy that. It would normally only come about if those that were buried already were impacted on. I mean, there could always be a case for a whānau that decide that they want to uplift their whole whānau, but I would not advocate against not charging that because it's a significant cost to the ratepayer. And we would certainly be trying to get to the crux of the rationale as to why and encourage that as a last resort. I'm not aware, and I haven't really gone through in detail around whether there's the sexton has the ability to say no in this case, but you'd have to have an absolutely significant rationale to disinter.
Have we answered all your questions, Councillor Pahurihuriwai?
Hi, thank you.
Next we move on to Councillor Parata. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just had a couple of things that I wanted to bring up. One was that same thing on page 117 around whānau. I don't know how whānau Pākehā do it, but whānau Māori, that the being part of the whole is a really important part culturally for us. So I wonder if there's a way that if the sexton does need to do the whole itself, that the men can be there to either see it, oversee it, participate in some way that that keeps council safe in terms of the health and safety, but also allows for us to complete that part of our cultural process in terms of ensuring that the whole is done and done well. At least that's how it happens on the coast, and it's a big part that our men they take seriously. It's a process of honour for the person that we're putting into the ground. I don't need a response from that, just something maybe to think about. The korero around gang insignia, I understand, and I don't really have anything to add in that space, except that I don't think any gang insignia should be put on any gravestone of children and of rangatahi, and I think that's a blanket rule. I think that as an adult, kei a koe tera, and your whānau can make that decision based on what you worry about in your life, but I think that rule should be blanket for children. No gang, excuse me, sorry, I've got a sick child here. No gang insignia at all. The other thing I just wanted to bring up was that this bylaw is really interesting because what we're talking about is how people deal with grief, how you deal with the grief of a loved one. It goes far beyond just the policies and the money and where people go. And so particularly the conversation around alcohol is a challenging one because rangatahi experience grief, especially the grief of somebody young, or mate ohorere, which is tragedy. It's a mate that came out of nowhere. They experience that really differently to how you experience the death of a loved one who has had a long life. So I think that the conversation around alcohol needs to consider their needs, and the way in which they experience grief and honour life. No, I don't think we should allow for big parties, but I do think that there's a tolerance to allowing them the space to grieve the way that they need to, because they're a part of our community as well. And I feel like it's really important for us to hold that space for them. Yeah, those were my main thoughts or main points to contribute to this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Parata. Councillor Tupara and then Councillor Cranston. Thank you,
Worship. It was odd for me to hear the comments about the gang insignia and offensive, and I'd seen the report specifically allocated a bit of space in there. But when I read about offensive insignia on gravestones, I immediately thought about those that discuss the massacre or massacres that occurred through the land wars that are on headstones, those statements about the defenders of the nation against the rebel Māori that were living and looking to protect and take care of their whenua. And I find that stuff extremely offensive. And so if we are going to look at what does cause an offence in our community, I think there are some far more pressing issues for us to deal with. And the historical abuse of Māori and impact on whenua and culture has been evident for more than 100 years on some of the graves, and nobody has raised the offensive nature of the way these stones have impacted on a vast majority of our community. And so if we are going to go there, I really do welcome going there, but this is a broader discussion that needs to confront some historical injustices that have already been discussed at the Waitangi Tribunal for many of our iwi and our hapu and our whānau. Certainly on the gang issue, when you read the names that are around their gang insignia, those are whakapapa names to this whenua. And those families have been part of iwi, hapu and whānau life in our rohe for a very long time. And the economic and social impacts that have happened on our people have been marked on those stones. And those gang insignias are significant because of where our community has driven particular sectors of some of our families into that space. And that insignia belongs to all of us. It's a symbol and a demarcation of how we have missed opportunities to better and improve our communities. And when I see the gang insignias, I look at the name, and those names are family names who have been here amongst our community for a very, very long time. And their right to be returned, whenua ki te whenua, go back to Papatuanuku, is an absolute right of theirs. And it's more a reflection on who we are than who they are. I picked up on, and this came up in the previous discussion about the navigation bylaws, is the word bylaw. It does for me send the wrong message to our community that we are a law. This is a legal practice. This will have legal implication. But in fact, it's a bylaw. And the term bylaw, I find, when talking particularly to our Māori communities, is misleading. And it really came to light to me reading about the cemeteries bylaws, is that we are talking about tikanga and kawa for the Māori community. And on page 97, bullet point 21, it indicates that Māori urupa are not included in our bylaws, and that should be, I think, more than just a bullet point. There should be a very clear statement to our Māori community that we are not impinging any bylaws or tikanga of council over your urupa. But in fact, your urupa practices might be useful for us to take into the public cemeteries. that we have traditional practice amongst our urupas up and down the Tairāwhiti, where we know how to do things, where we have a manner of action, of connection to each other and to the person who has passed away. And there are traditional practice that we do on our urupa, excluded from this report, that I'm sure would be useful for the way that we consider the public cemeteries going forward. And there are tikanga around alcohol, there's tikanga around taking kai in there, there's tikanga around best practice about health and safety that we utilise on our marae-based urupa, our hapu-based urupa, that would be easy to reference into development of a bylaw, which I think we should stop calling a bylaw and call it a tikanga, or a kawa, or a means of practice that we apply and grow a tradition around how we look after each other when we're acknowledging those who have passed away. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Cranston and then Councillor Tibble. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. I was just wondering whether the bylaw is an opportunity to give some clarity around an issue we've had in the past, and that's the ashes casting ceremonies, and particularly those that decide to have their ashes cast to the ocean. It has been controversial in the past. I know there's some sectors that are not that comfortable with it, but there's also sectors that have got in their rules that they want to have their ashes cast the ocean, surfers and fishermen and people that have had a lifelong connection to the ocean. So at the moment, there's not any clarity about what's in and what's out and how they could do that. So is the bylaw a place to address that?
So through you, Your Worship, as stated in the report, the scattering of ashes outside cemetery grounds is not covered by the bylaw.
So
we have to look at a separate policy approach. I know some councils have looked at controls under the Resource Management Act. I'm not saying that that's a route we want to go down, but there are various options under there.
Would we get that clarity?
So you can provide direction now. If this is something you want staff to investigate, we'd have to revisit our current work programs because we haven't included development of an ash scattering policy within our work program for the next year. So we'd have to look at if there's what we stopped doing. Or you could bring it up through the TRMP review. So that's where other councils have looked at it, looked at whether regulation's an option, decided no, it's not really the most appropriate way of managing the issue, and then moved to develop a policy that's not under any particular legislation, but a policy under the Act to provide guidance on where ashes are appropriate to scatter, are not appropriate to scatter, who should maybe be involved in that consultation process. But it remains non-statutory, it's not something generally enforceable.
Okay, Councillor Tibble and then Councillor Thompson.
Tēnā tātou katoa I te ata nei, e aku hoa kaunihira, tēnā tātou katoa, e te koromata, tēnā koe. E te kaihautu, tēnā anō koe. What a fabulous discussion this has brought about this morning. What I'm really enjoying is hearing the complexity of divergent and diverse worldviews that's occurring about our funerary rites. And I really welcome that discussion, knowing that what we're discussing here is about taking it out to the wider community. Thank you also to the conversation that's allowed us to go back to understand the issues of what might be seen to be excessive personal expression in relation to our monuments, but also to the backtracking of history about why there might be gang insignia, and to understand the harmonising and healing of the reason why we come through today to see that where Māori are heavily populated inside the gangs, there's an actual whakapapa for why that expression exists the way it does today. Now, on that point, I want to go to page 105 and expressly paragraph 68. And in that particular paragraph, what is of interest to me is the sentence that says, Council's obligation is supported by BCA provisions that provide Council with the means to permit any monument it thinks proper and at its discretion, refuse permission or prohibit monuments as it thinks fit. Now, with that footnote there of number 12 being present, that's back in essentially to the BCA. But what I want to also raise in relation to that is this is the space where cultural differentiation and worldviews exist. And I'm wondering, in relation to that decision-making point that will fall to council staff in the future, how does it accommodate for differentiated worldviews about what death is and what we give value to? Because expressly in 68, it says one person's excessive expression might overwhelm another's right to quiet reflection. I would like to put in the differentiation as one person's expression might negate the expression of a historical outcome based on what's happened in the past in relation to justice, for why you might have overstated space of pushing back, and as Māori would say, ka whawhai tonu mātou, we still fight for our right to the space. What I think is interesting also too in relation to that is how will our treaty compass fit in being able to negotiate what becomes fit in that regard to 68.60, para 68 of page 105. And what mechanisms we might have to be able to marry off what is essentially a Māori cultural worldview back to antiquity here inside Aotearoa and expressly the Tai Rāwhiti. Because without that lens on it, and given too that this is the only space in New Zealand where we have a demography where Māori more than half of the city and expected to be more in the future, the quality of our decision making, and especially where it comes to refusing permission or prohibition, will need to think quite deeply how it affirms Māori expressions going forward in relation to bylaws. To not think that way will be to create further disharmony and also to build a space of not being accepted for the way that our people wish to be understood in their own land. So I think it's a really pertinent conversation for us to be thinking about, and expressly because death rituals are a really big deal for Māori. And it's probably the biggest part where you see us being involved deeply in our cultural expressions of our tangata whenuatanga. So again, how will that refusing permission or prohibit monuments really be enacted at the point of making the decision as to yes or no, because where the iron hits the fire. Kia ora.
Through you, Your Worship, I'd probably just comment, I think you've got to the crux of the issue that our operational staff are dealing with in terms of monuments, and so we are raising that for your attention. This is something that they do struggle with. The current policy refers to monuments needing to be in accordance with our GDC aesthetic values, and the definition of what that means is not prescribed, but then it's very difficult to prescribe what's a simple monument, as you have all articulated far better than I.
Thank you for that. Okay, lucky last, Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, just a couple of comments. Page 101 regarding to alcohol, and 102 dog control. Yeah, basically it's just about respect for others, but if we are to put them in, I think that alcohol just needs to go into the alcohol. Dogs, it's going to be a dog handler dealing with it. They know their Dog Control Act should be an act that they deal with, and they know every day. They don't want to be going trying to look for it in the Cemeteries Act or anything. So yeah, if it relates to dog, it should be in dog. Alcohol, just a comment there. And in terms of the gang insignia on the headstones, I personally don't have an issue with that. Everyone's got their own view. But if you look at any council, it's always sucked up a lot of time and resources and caused a lot of drama. And I don't think we really want to and sort of achieve nothing. So I don't think we really need to go down that track. Yeah, different people have different ways of showing respect. The army might do a 7-gun salute. Someone in the car club might have their best friend, can you light it up at my everyone's got different ways to show respect, I suppose, and sort of respect other people's views.
Thanks for that, Councillor Thompson. Okay, councillors, thank you so much for the wide and varied input. I'm sure it will give staff a lot of food for thought. I do have a mover in Councillor Foster. I have a seconder in Councillor Wharehinga. All in favour, contrary, carried. We are going to break for 15 minutes. We'll be back at 10:30 for our online people. Thank you. And then we'll start on page 137. Moving into our freshwater planning update paper, that is page 137. Thank you. Nadine.
Hi, kia ora. Thank you, Your Worship. Just going over to the team, one of the matters that we needed to put formally to council for resolution as a result of the conversations that the Mayor had been having with our iwi partners. So you will recall that the Mayor consulted with you all around an in-principle support of retention of Te Mana o Te Wai.
Oh, everyone's gone. My screens are gone. All screens are gone.
Is it
It's no good, eh? But just be
Pay the bill.
Just give it a while.
Just pay the damn bill.
now?
You have that generator will kick in. Oh, it's coming back.
We need to reconnect.
Everything down our screens are going back. Everything was just black. Oh,
Here they are.
here we go. Thank you. We are back. Okay. There we go. Okay, we'll pass it back to Nadine. Can you guys hear us on screen? Yep. All good. Thank you, Nadine. So just start
I'll
from
start
the top.
again, just in case. So, you recall we had the conversation and the agreement following the Mayor's consultation with you around supporting the retention of Te Mana o Te Wai. That was along with the provisions around supporting the retention of Māori wards and fast-tracking consents for a number of projects. The paper that you've got today was prepared for the previous agenda, so we didn't have time to be able to include that resolution in there. I'm proposing an additional resolution to be added to the recommendation to formalise and close the loop on that process. And that resolution is that the council supports retention of Te Mana o Te Wai. So I'm going to leave that there for consideration. I'm happy to have a conversation on that particular item. So I'll hand over to
Thank you. So I'm going to you guys open it, and then we can move to questions.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm not the expert in the room today, folks. The experts are down there. Many thanks to Ariel for drafting the reports and for the rest of the team for your expertise in the water conservation space. So, questions directed to us. I'm here to apologise for forwarding another 3 reports on the councillorship. But just very, very quickly from me, there's plenty of work on this year in terms of planning, implementation and engagement. By way of overview, our focus for 2024 will be on engagement in the freshwater space, both within the catchment planning mahi, but as well some of the technical work that we're doing as well, working with our communities to resolve some of the key issues that we've got around sedimentation and nutrients and water quantity on the Poverty Bay Flats. So that's kind of what we're looking at in a nutshell for this year. Just very, very quickly going through the projects, Waipawa Catchment Plan and Regional Freshwater Plan projects are underway. We've got really good engagement with advisory groups in those places. We are looking to engage the horticulture sector this year around water quantity as well as tautawhine. Still quite a bit of research to do in various spaces. We're looking to convene an expert panel to explore nutrient management and water quality. We do have nutrient modelling underway at the moment. We are also exploring wetlands identification. We've got some extremely good engagement in the Tiarai catchment with whānau at Ohaku Marae, which will hopefully provide the springboard for launching into the wider catchment and working with the community landowners to look at the Tiarai catchment as a whole. I think it's a really, really interesting space, and we'll look forward to progressing some work there. We've done some extremely productive mahi with Ngāi Retirangi with regard to the Maungaro wetland. That's been a really, really positive project. And we're still deploying eDNA across the region as well, which will bring results once we finalise all of that work. Motu catchment plan, we have a draft available, which we will work with you in due course. Waipu is in a holding pattern at the moment while we look to re-engage Ngāti Porou to progress that mahi. It's fair to say that there's mutual interest in that work in terms of progressing that catchment plan to completion. We're just working out how we do that. The Uawa catchment plan, we had a very good meeting with the community in Uawa last Thursday, and I want to thank the councillors who attended the meeting the other night. It was really, really positive. It's fair to say that there's a lot of interest in working together and moving towards some aspirational goals from that area. Just on that as well, we're looking to combine the forestry work that we're doing alongside freshwater as well as farm planning to make a kind of a holistic approach to catchment planning. The Southern Catchment Plan, we're still looking to engage Ngāi Taumānuhiri in that space as a starting point for our engagement. And the Northern Catchment Plan, we're just coming off through some fairly extensive engagement around the bore drilling work that was occurring over the summertime. And then we will start to transition into catchment planning here as well. So plenty on folks in the engagement space. The implementation reports really just to articulate the value and the importance of practical work to extend the policy space and the technical engagement into real projects, and there's some really good work undertaken in that space as well. And we'll look to continue the delivery, I guess, of policy and some of our community aspirations in those very practical projects. And finally, I guess, and just with regards to the final item, the NIWA and the WGA reports, really what we're trying to signal here is that we're beginning to focus on water quantity and allocation. Now that's a very hairy beast for freshwater planning, and we need to make sure that we get this right. And so we're really signalling we've got some research that we've gathered, and we're just starting to share this information. Firstly, it would be really great to take you on that journey. So I think just on that, we'll be looking to workshop those two reports in a more fulsome way. Also bringing into that conversation the water supply work that Juliet and Amanda have done and presented to you in December. At this stage, in terms of surface water, really it's just about exploring some of the key concepts, some of the things that we need to think about, and some of the options and what kind of impacts they might have on ecosystem health, which is really important for freshwater planning. The WGA report's really just signalling that we do have a long-term declining trend in groundwater levels for the Makoni aquifer, and we need to get on top of that as well. That'll be it for me, just by way of overview, but if you have any questions, we'd be more than happy to field them.
Thank you. Councillor Gregory.
Thank you. I just have a question around the Waipu JMA.
which was set up in about 2015, was it? And been a little bit of progress here and there. Nothing since 2022. I just wonder, there's a goal there to renew commitments to complete the catchment plan by the end of 2024. I just wonder how.
Through your worship, it's a really good question. A lot of our work depends on how successful we are in the engagement space. And so I think time will tell in terms of whether that's actually achievable or not, but that's certainly a goal that we've set that we'll both be quite keen to progress towards. Whether we achieve that or not, I think will depend on the decisions that we have in the short term.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Alder, thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've got quite a few questions into the group of the discussion, but I'd first like to make a comment on Mana Otawai. We all want beautiful, pristine waters, agreed. I'm not challenging that. Why has Mana Otawai never been committed to this council as a discussion item? It comes up for us to give a comment on. It's never been committed to paper, and it's never been on an agenda. Can I? That's the first.
Through your worship, so the reason why is that it currently is enshrined in legislation. So we are required by law to have Te Mana Otawai statements in our freshwater planning. So that is why we may have done it when the legislation might have been first introduced. I can't remember off the top of my head. There would have been a conversation and a paper that would have outlined generally the legislation and the requirements of the council. The reason, so that's the reason why you haven't had a paper, simply because it's in law now. And what the conversation through the consultation that the Mayor undertook and what our iwi partners were seeking assurance from us was that we would support that retention of Te Mana Otawai provision in freshwater planning.
Well, I would suggest if you don't know what we're agreeing to, it's very hard to agree to it. And that's speaking for myself. So, shooting to page 154 of this paper, and there's a comments throughout the paper about how the government is simply reviewing NPS-FM and presumably Mana Otawai's role in there. And the statement here is unlikely that the new NPS will fundamentally affect Council's choices in this regard. How do we know that to be true if we don't know what the changes are going to be? They're reviewing the spatial plan and it's a central government decision. The cost of the consultation process that we're running down at the moment, heading full on into, is going to be significant. And if change is brought about by central government, this could be wasted money. Shouldn't we park this process up a little bit? And is it not why the government's given us a 3-year extension on this process so that we can hold back, wait and see what's coming, and then progress? And by parking it up, I'm not saying we're dropping it at all. We can progress bits that are maybe insignificant in parts. And this would also be considerate to the staff who are under pressure with recovery. That's my end of comment for that point.
I'll leave it to Nadine and Joe to comment.
I can't comment on the direction that council wants to take in terms of its commitment that it gave in principle to Te Mana Otawai. So that's a conversation that you will need to have amongst yourselves and give us direction on that one. Nor can I comment around the council's desire to put everything on pause apart from we will then be lurching for whichever government is in place and the legislative reforms that will go underway. What we're currently doing is already in train. It's already planned for, and we've got the resources committed to that and budgeted for it. So it's still in our 3-year plan as well as part of our work program. So there's no diversion of resources required from the planning team into the recovery space. So that wouldn't hold for us from an operational aspect. At the end of the day, the council is the decision makers on what you want to prioritise. So I would suggest that's something that you need to discuss amongst yourselves and give us direction.
Supplementary, if you may, that most of the river systems in our region are forming catchment groups, some already have, and some are still in the process. Would it not be easier to deal with these rivers if all those catchment groups were already formed?
That would be helpful in terms of engagement and working alongside council, absolutely, and that's the intent. So when Yanak and Joe and the team went to Uwawa to have the conversation, it was about identifying who wants to be part of this catchment. If there's already a well-formed catchment group, we will work alongside them, alongside them as well, to make sure that we've got views captured in the areas. But it makes it easier because they're well-formed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Alder. I'll go to, where did I make my notes? Who was next on my list and why am I didn't have a list. Oh, there we go. Councillor Foster's next and then it's Councillor Wharehinga. Thank you.
Thank you. Page 138, the first paragraph about the government has signalled its intention to amend the Resource Management Act to change how to why hierarchy of obligations is applied to individual consent applications. This means that the consent applications will not have to demonstrate how their individual activity adheres to the hierarchy. And consent authorities won't be able to consider the hierarchy of obligations in their decision making. So I know we've, Te Mana o Te Wai is in our, it is what it is, it's law at the moment. So can you give me an example of how Te Mana o Te Wai might hinder a consent? If we, what the government is trying to achieve is, obviously they're seeing this as an impediment to some consents. So how, can you give me an example of what kind of consent this could be an impediment to and what the ramifications of what the government is trying to achieve here?
Through you, Your Worship. Through you, Your Worship. I'm not going to refer directly to our rules, so this is a hypothetical example, but say we had a fully discretionary consent activity and an applicant was applying for a take and use of water that was purely commercial, so wasn't providing for the health of the river, not providing for domestic use, the health and well-being of people. That water system they wanted to take from was already allocated or over-allocated, and they wanted to take a significant amount of water, then that would be where Te Mana o Te Wai and those hierarchy of obligations becomes very important, because the first priority is to the health and well-being of the waterway itself, then human health, and then other uses.
Right, but that's pretty standard. That's pretty obvious, isn't it? But is there any other way that a person with a consent, putting in a consent in for for a building or doing something on their property, how this could this impediment any of their activities, or could it trigger?
Your Worship, maybe if you were discharging some kind of contaminate as a result of your activity, if you were doing earthwork, maybe, for example, but a building.
Just further to your question, Councillor, I think what it shows is that it's actually incumbent on Council to give effect to Te Mana o Te Wai, to give it form through its plans. And in doing so, the content provides direction for the consenting staff. So it's not incumbent on the consent applicants to try and demonstrate how they are going to give effect to Te Mana o Te Wai, because it's built into the plans. And so the direction should flow naturally from the top down.
That makes it really obvious, but so I can't understand why would you want to change that? What's the intent? I mean, is there has there been something in the past that has put an impediment why the government is wants to change this, or is it just something that?
So through you, Your Worship, it was something that went through as an amendment without consultation, without a detailed regulatory impact statement. So we would be guessing if we try and tell you what the government had in mind. Obviously, they will have some reason that they've done this.
And just for clarity, and this is for myself, but I'm sure other councillors would have the same issue, or not the same issue, the same question. So we have been using these principles for the last how many years, Joe? The Te Mana o Te Wai in our planning instruments.
The been in the MPS since 2020, but Te Mana o Te Wai has been in the MPS in some form since 2017.
Yes, so it's been part of our planning process. If then the government decide going forward they are going to change it or ditch it, we will receive clear instruction from the government they will then say, we instruct councils to stop using that framework. Am I correct? So what we are saying, we have worked with it, our planning instruments, it's in our planning instruments. We intend to carry on until some time, and it's all in our plans already, and it makes sense as well. Is it correct what I'm saying? Yes, just for myself, and that's how I approached it right from the beginning. Kapai, thank you. I will, are you not finished, Councillor?
Yeah, I've just got one other one too. So yeah, thank you for that. It's just been bugging me actually why you'd want to change something that's obviously enshrined and working so well. You know, so and you know, maybe there's a legitimate reason. So obviously not. I just want to go.
Yannick just wants to make a comment.
Further to that, I guess, you know, te mana o te wai, te mauri o te wai, te oranga o te tai o, ki o te ki tai, these are all common sense concepts that make sense to our community. And regardless of what you call them, they actually connect us strongly to our mandate under the RMA to manage the natural and physical resources of our region. This simply is a language that our community have actually gravitated to quite strongly because it makes sense. And the kōrero, the wānanga, the hui that we've had around, we've had enormous support and people get it. And so really, it's just an articulation, I think, of the regulatory function that we have and translating it into something that makes sense. And that's why I tend to support and perhaps just finally from me, with regard to Council Orders we're not here to be impractical. Our intention is not to make our waterways pristine. It's to recognise that there's a balance here and there's a framework for us to think about in terms of the relationships that we have with our community and tangata whenua, but also that hierarchy of obligations that we need to consider when we're making decisions around freshwater. And that's it. Everything else is up for us as a community and as an organisation to determine.
Yeah, just got one other little question. It's on page 126 and it's a bullet point under 26 and it's about community awareness and education litter dumping campaign. So, you know, when I see that, it just triggers a really alert button. So obviously there is a lot of litter dumping going on in our drains and waterways. Otherwise we wouldn't be wanting to have a campaign. You know, I've got a couple of questions. What kind of litter? Is it just green waste, or are we talking, you know, cars and you know, serious stuff? And how is that campaign going to be run?
Through your worship, sorry, I can't speak to that that question, Councillor. That would probably require Sandy to speak to it, but we can follow up on that. It's okay, but you know, as soon as I read that, it's clearly, unless there was a problem, and you know, we know that litter dumping is a bit of a problem around the region, but when you're talking about waterways, you know, that's alarm bells really start ringing, because that's
We're in the next paper. There are two papers, my friend.
But we still will need to get the answers.
But I admire your work ethic. Follow up. Moving into paper number 2 while we're still in paper number 1.
I'll bring it up next time because I've got a couple other questions for the next paper.
That is next.
Yeah.
I have Councillor Wharehinga, and then I have Councillor Telfer, and then I have Councillor Ria.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I actually stand for what I have to say here. Aspirationally, we want our water to be pristine, though, right? Which is why I'm 100% happy to move the recommendation that our CE has brought forward for our council to support Te Mana o Te Wai. It's aligned to our Taira Whiti view that water health is fundamental and that protecting fresh water protects the wider environment. Ask the residents of Uawa, Mangaheia, Waikohu, Waipawa, Te Karaka, Tolaga about how important freshwater health Te Mana o Te Wai is post-cyclones. It's so important. For us at local government, us decision makers, we have to acknowledge our responsibility for making decisions about fresh water that prioritises the health and well-being of freshwater now and into the future. It's a next generation framework, a mokopuna framework. Te mana o te wai is widely publicised, and there's so much information about it. There is no excuse for not knowing about it. There's no excuse for us as decision makers being ignorant in regard to te mana o te wai. It's borderline willful ignorance. It is a common sense framework, a framework that aligns to our Tairawhiti region. All of us, every New Zealander, has an obligation to manage fresh water in a way that ensures it sustains present and future generations, and all of us in Tairawhiti, all around our country, we're responsible for the care of fresh water and providing for the health of our nation. That's why we should, this shouldn't be up for a huge amount of discussion. This is common sense stuff. As our staff have said, I'm more than happy to move that recommendation. Thank you very much for bringing it to this paper.
Thank you. Next, I have Councillor, did you second that? Thank you, Councillor Foster. Councillor Telfer and then Councillor Ria.
I just want to say, is this even necessary? Because my understanding of it, there's never been any talk about abolishing te mana o te wai. It's around reframing the hierarchy of it and the way it's used. So this is all about when we talk about projects and fast-tracking projects, getting projects done. Is around, and there's been no talk about abolishing this act, so I don't think we need to even be going there. It's around the hierarchy, the way it's used. So unless I've missed something majorly, I don't even know why we need to be having this conversation.
Well, the government has moved so fast, and I think it comes in response to signals being sent.
What we're having a conversation, Your Worship, is because the support that was given by council and the discussion wasn't in principle support. A resolution is what was sought from our iwi partners, and so we're just tying off the loose ends there. The next ones will be around paper back for the Māori wards and the fast track component and the resolution of support for that. That was what was requested. We did an in principle support, and so we're just tidying this up. And unfortunately, as I said, we just weren't able to get it on the in the report.
Councillor Ria.
Thank you, Your Worship. I too want to speak to te mana o te wai, but first I'm going to go back to the report. I'm going to go back to the report. I'm going to thank you, everyone. I mean, catchment plans are not an easy task, so thank you, thank you. That's the first thing I want to do, is to acknowledge everybody's hard work. I just wanted to, in reading through the Waipawa catchment plan from the report, there is an interest of tangata whenua. It says that we will seek interest. There is an interest, so let's seek it. And iwi to be engaged over the Waipawa catchment plan. And then I had made note that there's no mention of the Taruhiru plan, which is currently in development, but then I see that that's in the next paper. So I too was jumping ahead like Larry was in some of the topics. In terms of the Motu catchment plan, I am concerned that the voices of ngā pōtiki hapu of the Motu Matawai area are not reflected in the plan. I had a hui just yesterday with 5 ahika women from the marae in relation to te mana o te wai, and I felt that their concerns, 4 of them had no idea about the current catchment plan proposal, and one of them had been involved in catchment hui but felt strongly that her concerns and questions and queries were essentially either ignored or discounted by landowners. I also want to highlight that a Māori landowner is not always necessarily tangata whenua. So that a Māori landowner, you can come in from anywhere in New Zealand and buy land in an area, but just because that person happens to be Māori, it does not qualify as tangata whenua engagement. So I realise there are Māori land owners and Māori land interests up in the Motu Matawai catchment area, but they are not the same as seeking engagement and opinion and partnership with ngā pōtiki of Matawai Marae. So I just wanted to make that very clear. That was for the Motu catchment plan. Yeah, so the ladies felt very strongly that their voices were not reflected within the catchment plan. So I just want to make that observation for the team. Finally, I also, like Councillor Wharehinga, would really like to thank the CE for introducing the Te Mana o Te Wai aspect into moving it from principle commitment to where we have it now sitting on the table in public. And I just wanted to add that over the last 2 months, maybe more than 2 months, 3 months, I've been working with different hapu groups over Te Mana o Te Wai specifically. And so there were things that I learnt as a council member, but I went out and I sought more information on YouTube. I watched MFE descriptions of Te Mana o Te Wai. I listened to people like Annex Sykes and Tina Porau, who are great advocates for Te Mana o Te Wai, but also have lots and lots of knowledge. And I think that what Te Mana o Te Wai, it's really strange to me that some view Te Mana o Te Wai as something that could be threatening without understanding it properly. Te Mana o Te Wai focuses on Te Mauri o Te Wai, and Te Mauri o Te Wai is the preservation of the life essence of water bodies. That's the best that I can translate Te Mauri o Te Wai, the preservation of life essence of water bodies. The reorganisation of the hierarchy means that economics can come before the health of waterways. And so we think, oh, you know, we're not getting rid of it, but it just means a change in the hierarchy. But a disruption of the paper as it is, when you watch the MFE accounts of why Te Mana o Te Wai is put together, how it's put together, and the benefits that it can have, rearranging the hierarchy actually throws the whole thing out of sync. It cannot fulfill its purpose if the hierarchy is messed with, because then we're not putting water first, we're not putting community needs first, we are able to bypass the first two hierarchy priorities and go straight to economic gain. And that's what I have a problem with. I have a huge problem with that the messing with the hierarchy causes that with the under Te Mana o Te Wai. So, yes, that's me. Kia ora tātou.
Thank you for that. Any more comments or queries? Councillor Tupara.
Thank you, Your Worship. I feel as passionate as Councillor Wharehinga and Councillor Rea, certainly around Te Mana o Te Wai. Not so much as in itself, but how we are applying that in our reporting and in the update. Some of certainly the reo that's associated with our water is the reo of the Tairāwhiti. The names of our awa, of our rivers, is the names of the Tairāwhiti. They are go to the root of who we are and who we whakapapa for, our ancestors. They are the way up in Uawa, and you say, when we have meeting, where did we have meeting? We had it in Uawa. You know, where did we have that hui? We had it at Te Arai. We had it up the Waipawa. We had it at the Motu. And that water is the identifier of who we are as a community and have been for ancestors going thousands of years back. And in line with that, water is taonga. And when we discuss water in our update reports, I'd like to hope that we can start referring to it as taonga. And that's part of the speak from Te Mana o Te Wai, if we're looking to embrace that. Any of our whānau from the Tairāwhiti get up and identify themselves and do their pepeha, they will identify with the water. They will identify with the awa and the moana. specific to where they're standing, specific to what marae they might be on, or specific to the person they're addressing or the group that they're addressing. And bringing some of those elements into our reporting. Talking about water because it has mana. That's why we're talking about it. And because it has mana, it has mauri. And because it has mauri, there is a life there that is part of the life of who we are as a community. When I go across to Taranaki, Taranaki will talk about their wana, their awa. When I go to the South Island, they will talk about their wana and their awa. And so here, we're touching on, and the reporting is talking about us as a people. What makes us distinct and different to every other rohe in New Zealand, but more specifically who we are up and down the coast and back again. And so when our iwi, when we're seeking engagement with iwi, with our treaty partners, we're seeking that, and they're coming forward into that engagement because we're talking specifically about them and their health, their well-being, their whakapapa, and their future generations. And whilst that's wrapped up in Te Mano o Te Reo as, or Te Wai as a package there, for me, we should start packaging that into our reports. So whatever government comes and whatever governments do about Te Mana o Te Wai, externally, it's embedded in the culture and the tikanga of our place. And it's stated here on our blotter pad, tō tātou tikanga o te kainihira, the Manaaki, the Rongo Mauri, the Rangatiratanga, being pono to who we are as people and as community. Mauri should be in this report. Mana should be in this report. Kaonga should be in this report. Because not so much that someone out there did a policy on Te Mana o Te Wai, but that's what we are, who we are. And it speaks to the base of our identity as a tairāwhiti. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, if I have no more kōrero on this, I do want to welcome our friend from GHL. We're just dealing with our last report next, so we will probably just be a few more minutes. I'm going to last kōrero, Councillor Tibble. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to come in to hit a point home in terms of page 149 in paragraph 54. Firstly, even if you read past 54, the fact that the hierarchy of obligations will not be anything that our local authority or consent authorities need to consider, what I want to say is that for the work that our staff do in 56, the point that we affirm that we're still committed as a staff to be able to work with our treaty partners in this way. I just want to endorse that we're truly thankful that that is a consideration and that at this local level we can still continue to think about those things. I think what's again occurring in two main topics today, the one with regard and this one right here, is the differentiation of methodologies on how you protect resource. And again, even here, the methodology, the Te Mana o Te Wai, puts the importance of the resource first, and in that regard puts the importance of the development of business as being secondary to the primacy of the protection of the resource. I also want to bring to the attention that the opposing methodology that would replace the NPS-FM is in fact the reverse of that, putting business interests first. The problem with that is, again, it's the clash between worldviews of what goes first, the resource or the development of humans, or the development of humans at the expense of the resource. Just wanting to be able to place that quite clearly, but at the same time, give a great bouquet to our staff and that intention in point 56, that we'll continue to work with what is local and what is the way that we think about things here in the Tairāwhiti, even understanding that that hierarchy of obligations will not be applied at the, again, striking iron of resource consent delivery. delivery. And the reason that's important is that we have historically, here in the Tairāwhiti, over the last 10, 15 years, overcommitted our resource consent to water. And that actual practice is the reason why Te Mana o Te Wai became important in its hierarchy of obligations. So I'm aware too that, as was expressed by a councillor before, that understanding the depth of the application of what sits ethically in the thinking behind Te Mana o Te Wai is what might be missing from everybody's considerations who've not had the due regard to understand the importance of that piece of work. Nonetheless, thank you to our staff.
Thank you for that, Councillor Tibble. So, councillors, I have recommendations on the table. First is to note the report. Nadine, what are the second and third ones?
The second was just that council supports the retention of Te Mana o Te Wai.
That's so. I had a mover in Councillor Wharehinga. I had a seconder in Councillor Foster. All in favour? Aye. Contrary? Carried. Thank you for that. I told a big fat porky to our friends of GHL, I do not have one small paper. I still have this to do after that one small paper, but I forgot it because I had my agenda bound in 3 because it was so big. So what we are going to do next, I am going to, what's the word I'm looking for? Not suspend, adjourn this meeting. I won't suspend it. I'm going to adjourn this meeting for now. Thank you. Can I do it?
I have a problem because we've still got 2 public papers and I can't rejoin the live stream. And that last paper has got some interest.
Can't we adjourn just for half an hour?
Silence. I'll go on a break.
Oh, that goes for
You
the
can go on a
minute.
break. I'll go on a break.
Go on a break. Yeah. Okay, so are we? Let me know, Heather. And thank you. And carry on with our paper on page 155. Thank you, councillors. Thanks, Yannick. Thanks to our lovely science team, and thank you for coming back, and apologies for making you leave.
You're bad.
Okay, councillors, page 155. Welcome back to our science team. We have got our freshwater implementation update. Joe, we're going to pass over to you. It is a noting report, councillors. Yannick, thank you, my friend. There we go. We're in your hands.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. I did speak to it very quickly at the start of the last item, and I'll take that report as read and happy to field any questions.
Kapai. Councillors, any questions? There was a question from Councillor Foster and Councillor Ria. So, Councillor Foster, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just on 163. It's about 163 on 26 community awareness and education litter dumping campaign. And I was just, alarm bells started ringing when I saw that, because obviously there's a problem. They could have community awareness or education if there wasn't. This is our waterways, our drainage, rivers and everything, and if litter dumping is becoming predominant, that's a major concern. And the other question is, are we just dealing with green waste, or is it vehicles, or some more serious issues being dumped in our waterways?
Through you, Your Worship, I did find out a little bit about where this came from. We had a consultant undertake some stream walks to assess the condition of some of our urban waterways, including the Tarihiru, and that's where they started to pick up on the litter issue. And my understanding is that it's a range of litter through some of our household items, but it was something that they flagged for our attention, so that when we did progress this particular project, this is something to put on our comms to start to raise that public awareness and awareness around waterways and the vital importance of them in our urban landscape. They're often forgotten, so it's really just about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, after what we've gone through over the last year, our drainage, particularly locally here on the flats and I know up the coast, all our drainage is so important. It's getting that water from the mountain to the sea as fast as possible, and yeah, so okay, yeah, great.
Councillor Ria, you were also veering into that paper earlier.
Yes. The freshwater implementation paper. Thank you, Your Worship. I just had a part about the feasibility study mentioned. Firstly, thank you for I really enjoyed in both papers that there was an aspect on Te Ara in the first freshwater paper, which we haven't seen a lot of details to, and then Tarihiru was addressed in this paper, so thank you very much for that. And then just a part about the feasibility study mentioned on page 165, and I just wanted to ask if advice had been considered and included around the climate change, flood mitigation, suggested strategies, which we received in a presentation quite some time ago. Now, I can't recall if it was Forest and Bird or Manataiao, but they did come with some diagrams and suggestions for climate change mitigation examples. And so I have often thought when we come across papers like this particular feasibility study on page 165, if those suggestions which have been put to council are considered and included in the work moving forward.
Through you, Your Worship, that was a presentation from Forest and Bird, and it was all about giving rivers room to move, which is really one of the tenets of nature-based solutions. It's about working with the river or whichever natural body you're sort of trying to mitigate the effects of. So yes, all that information is feeding into the project, and there are a number of councils that are working on different nature-based solution feasibility studies. So there's been an overall literature review that's been across Aotearoa and wider than Aotearoa, and all the councils are picking up that information, and then it's informing their studies.
Number here, Joe. Sorry, one other thing. Just for the freshwater implementation, the Taruhiru, I know that there was some loss in terms of riparian planting specifically along Taruhiru due to the flooding. And it wasn't anywhere that I read in the report, and I just wanted to know because I think it's really important for us to, because I'm absolutely aware of the amazing things that the freshwater team do, and I've always been a really strong advocate for the community engagement, the working with iwi and all the kaimahi and the freshwater implementation team. But I think it's really pertinent for council to understand that not everything is roses. You know, there are some issues that come up. So, you know, for us to just be aware that, you know, we did suffer a severe plant loss when we did planting along Taruhiru waterways, but, you know, we have a plan for mitigation. We intend to maybe replant, or actually we've decided that mitigation further in the upper catchment is actually going to help ease the stress on the lower catchment. Just that sort of information. But in saying that, again, absolutely support what you're doing, but it's nice for us to get a more complete picture of things that really work, but also things that maybe didn't work and now we're trying to readjust. Kia ora.
Any other questions in regards to this paper? It is a noting paper. Councillor Thompson, thank you.
Move, sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah, just on page 162, talks about integrated catchment plans by July 25. But one thing people talk to me all about is the Wainui stream that comes out by Pāri Street there. It used to be just a little stream, and since the Sponge Bay development, now when it rains, it sort of pours out of there, and it's really changed the landscape of the beach, and that beach area is quite dirty all the time. I'm just wondering how this would relate to something like that, because it talks about having a management action plan, capital works, and timeframes that issues like this will be addressed. I'm just wondering how that relates in reality.
Through you, Your Worship, we do have some stormwater assets and management within that Wainui area and on Lloyd George Road. So I know that this is one of the areas that the team is looking at. We are also looking at it in terms of our urban growth and development planning and whether any changes need to be made in terms of the rules that we have in the Tairā management plan around development in that area in particular, which feeds into Wainui Stream, one of the areas that feed into Wainui Stream.
Also on page 162, number 21, it talks about the water quality and E. coli and everything else. I'm just wondering, it talks about the sewage discharge. I'm just, what and the sciences. I'm just wondering the actual effect of that on the river and how long it sort of lasts for, because I know at the beach you can't go surfing for a week, and that's with the waves sort of turning it over and down by midway there. I'm just wondering like the residual effect on the river, given that we open it quite frequently.
What about science too?
I can't really hear the questions very well, sorry.
Sorry, just on page 162.21 talks about where we release the sewage.
I think it's a question about the long-term effects of wastewater overflow discharges to the rivers on water quality.
I guess,
Get back to us.
I might get back to you on that if that's okay.
Thank you. Awesome. Yannick.
Just further to that, Councillor, we did undertake some fecal source tracking across some of our urban waterways. You will be interested to know that we do have an E. coli issue in some of those waterways, including the Wainui Stream, which has a human DNA component to it. So we do know that that is an issue for us. And as we're all aware, we do have spikes in E. coli across some of our waterways, including the Tarahiru and Waimata, where we do have discharges during our storm events. That is an issue. It's one of our prime issues across the region as well. And we have E. coli. So this is a region-wide issue, and it's not an easy fix, but it's something that we're going to work as well.
Hi, Councillor Alder.
Thank you, Your Worship. Your Worship, excuse me. Page 155, second paragraph from the bottom, starting the newly elected coalition government announced. This is sensible. I'd like to know what other councils are doing in this respect, and I would like to propose that we accept this extension offered, which will giving time for the catchment groups to be formed, time for us as a council and our communities to adapt to the new plan, whatever that may be.
We already have an extension until 2026, which we accepted, hey Joe?
We have accepted that? Okay, thank you. And yeah, giving time to focus on the program.
Even before this came out, we got an extension to 2026 because of what we have been through. So we are already on a
thank you.
That. Okay, do I have a seconder for this paper? I've got Councillor Ria who moved it, Councillor Telfer seconded, all in favour, contrary carried. Thank you to our science team, and again apologies for kicking you out and then inviting you back in. It's lovely to have you join us here today. Okay, councillors, next we go to our NIWA flow and groundwater modelling reports and an implication for freshwater planning. That is page 170. So Paul, are you going to guide us through this, or are you going to take it as read because it is massive And we look forward to your input on this. And then there will be questions.
We might have Yannick to the intro, but first I will just explain this little leaflet. So this little leaflet was circulated in the break. It's just a summary of that big groundwater modelling report that's been prepared. So you have something to take away with you and some practice. But just to lead in, this is essentially the introduction of 2 technical pieces of work that have been undertaken to inform our freshwater planning, particularly looking for discussions, decision-making around allocation of water. Obviously, this is just one piece of the picture, but it's part of that kete of knowledge that we will be bringing to the TRMP committee, that will be taken to our freshwater advisory group to start to think about how we allocate water and our water management. Anything more you want to add, Yannick?
No, other than to issue an apology for the NIWA report. It's a really thorny report.
It's quite dense.
Do not take it as read.
It's a real grade. So. But it's a great start for a conversation around a really, really critical conversation piece, which is water quantity. And we need to bring that into focus this year.
And just to say, we do have a work scheduled, but this really gives you a chance to have some of the technical information in advance and maybe ask any questions of clarity so you can help. We know that you're understanding the information base we're working from.
So, Councillor Foster.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, really in-depth report, all right. And actually some really interesting scenarios and pretty obvious conclusions too. So yeah, the big thing is really to start with is that the allocation is totally different to what the actual take is. So what we have is we've got people applying for allocation. They get this allocation, but it's not used. And in some instances, it's only 50% used. So that inhibits anybody else be able to get any part of that allocation when only sometimes 50% of it is actually being used. So there's a total, that whole system is flawed. And we're talking about a banded system. I'm not quite, could you just explain what a banded water allocation is?
Through you, Your Worship. So really what we're trying to do is there's a couple of stages, I guess, that we're trying to understand. One, what's that low flow? What's that bottom threshold look like? Where do you set that? How do you know? And then on top of that, as the NIWA report recommends or suggests, is, okay, where do you turn the taps off above that critical low flow? And the idea being that that turn-off point gives you a buffer to allow for a lag drop below that critical turn-off line, I guess. Yeah. Over that point, it's really about how you allocate the available water to users across the Poverty Bay Flats. And one way of doing it is creating a series of bands. Some councils just have one band that people take on. Others have more than one band. We have 2. We have an A band, which creates a greater reliability for users, but that's much closer to the low threshold, right? So there's less of it. And then there's the B band, which really includes the winter flow. So there's what we've done is we've structured the allocation framework according to those 2 bands. And there's, I guess, some consistency with that kind of first in, first served approach. Those within the A band get more water during those summer months because it's much closer to the lower threshold. Those in the B band, it's really about harvesting water outside of that key irrigation season. So it's how we structure the quantum of water available during any particular time of the year. Right. That's a really tricky thing to do.
Yeah, well, that's right, because the first in, first serve is just not servicing the community the way it probably was originally intended, because of the droughts that we've had, and we've been lucky we haven't had a drought for a couple of years. So, but the other thing is with the aquifer, because we've got saline intrusion, and you're saying that it needs to be 15% less take to make it sustainable, and yet we've gone through a program over 4 or 5 years ago, the recharge program, which was actually quite successful, And and that says in the paper that that's the future of sustainability of that recharge program. And we've also we're discussing this on our wastewater management committee meeting as well. All of a sudden now with the upgrade of the wastewater treatment plant, we've got this water that we need to be using and utilising, and that's a possibility that water could be used for recharging aquifer. Not saying that's gospel, because the water obviously has to be tested possibly and to make sure that is a possibility. But for me, that's about being sustainable. I mean, it's about having a circular economy when we've got this unlimited water supply, and we could help recharge our aquifer, which would help our Poverty Bay Flats water woes in that particular instance, and possibly other ways of drip feeding water as well. So, what I read from this was actually there's a solution. We've got problems, but there's actually a solution down the track, and we've got the data. We've been through down this whole program, so let's investigate it even a bit more. And I know there is appetite in the Wastewater Management Committee to pursue those conversations. So thank you, and great to see this happening. Water is a huge part of our future.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson and Gregory.
Thank you, Yannick, to you and your team for the paper. I was really surprised, given the subject matter, that alternate use and disposal wasn't addressed in here in some way or form, and I'm even more surprised that the recharge project got into print in the absence of that conversation. Simply because, I don't believe councillors currently have an appetite for pursuing this. We certainly got no budget for pursuing this. And the end game is, who would ever pay for it? Because no one owns water in this country, and you cannot force the people that have the right to take from the Makoti aquifer to pay for recharging the aquifer. And if 1 out of 21 decide they're not going to pay, they can't be forced to. So I'm really surprised and a little disappointed, I'll say, that the recharge project is in here but without the AU&D. But the rest is great to have some up-to-date data. A 15% reduction in use versus allocation, I think is the language, yes. Have we got a time frame to try and achieve that, or have we hit the wall with how far we can trim back use at the moment?
Through you, Your Worship, this is really what the Waipawa Catchment Plan review process will be grappling with, is how do we phase any potential reduction in allocation if council decides a reduction in allocation is what's needed.
All right, then can that conversation please be dovetailed with AU&D?
Through you, Your Worship, that's part of the intent of the workshop next month. So you remember before Christmas we had the workshop on water supply options, and council wanted to workshop that paper. So we're bringing back that workshop. We've also brought these 2 bits of technical information, so you have that kete of knowledge with you when you walk into that workshop in April, rather than us presenting you with a whole bunch of technical information just before the workshop. We're giving you a little bit more time to digest, hopefully, so you come prepared and ready to work.
Okay, Councillor Gregory, thank you.
Thank you for this very heavy technical paper. But I did find the summary of most use, and the most important thing is that the implications of these findings on water allocation in our district are significant, and this is an indication. Well, we've had earlier indications, but this further deepens indications that something is going to have to happen so that there is a future out there. That's all I would like to say. Thank you.
Councillor Taufa and then Councillor Ria. Thank you, Councillor.
Yeah, look, touching on what Larry mentioned, discussions around the wastewater committee around the use of this water. We're being told that the water coming out of this new treatment plant is pretty good. And then moving on to what Councillor Robertson just said, you know, well, who's going to pay? Are these guys going to pay for this? Well, I think that's a real classic example of we need to look at the bigger picture. This is like a potentially, and we've just had John Ray here talking to us about certain things, but this is a classic example of economic development for our region. And it's not so much about who pays for that water, it's about what then that water can produce for our region, and then that filters through every business in this town, whether it's guys getting stuff prepared or it's in creating employment. So that to me is a classic example of our district putting a plan together. We've had all this research done over many years. This is about, and the government's talked quite often about us coming up with solutions. Don't just come to them with our hand out, come with solutions. So this is a classic example of a solution that then provides economic growth for our region. So I think we need to package something like this. This is a golden opportunity to package something like this up in a way that we can involve the government in it, but we're actually showing that we've got a solution to our own problem. So there's a great example. I think we quite often we stop at the point where we go, oh, but you know, that person can't afford to pay. They're not going to pay so much more for that water. We've got to look past all that, and it's about what's best for our whole region. So this is a classic example. It can solve an issue we've got with water coming out of that treatment plant. It can solve an issue of irrigators being able to have access to water, then to go, remember, having the water is not the end of it. The infrastructure they've got to then go and fund to actually deliver that stuff is huge. But the economical benefits for our region is massive. So, golden opportunity.
Thank you for that. Councillor Ria.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for those who worked on putting this together. I got to the end of I thinking, yes, it's the last one, and then oh my God, it's the last one, because it was a lot, and I will have to go back again and read it over a couple of times just to really sink my teeth into it. But I had a couple of parts. So in terms of the NIWA flow, the allocation for that has been, does it factor in water take by water tankers who fill local residential water tanks?
No, I don't think so.
What was the question?
Is there a specific capped allocation, or is it even considered what water tankers who supply residential properties with water? Is there a consideration for that in terms of the?
If I may ask this, if you're within the Waipawa catchment, there is a current allocation framework. Outside of the Waipawa catchment, there is not. So if you're talking about the coastal residential communities, we have a couple of private consent holders. So I know there's one in Groundwater. I think that's the only one I can think of outside of the Waipawa catchment, but the rest are operating under the permitted use.
Okay, thank you. And then my last one was just, it's kind of what Councillor Taufa talked about. Kind of is, but kind of not. The future for the Makoti aquifer, which is already at critical levels, and we need to remember that it didn't get like that overnight, that it's been heading that way for years, critical levels in the Makoti aquifer, that the regeneration of that area, and so I suppose this is where we do come back to the argument that having Te Mana o Te Wai can cause, because in the case of developing economics for the benefit of the region, in comparison to the fact that that specific water body is already at critical levels, that would mean under Te Mana o Te Wai, a preference would be given to the rejuvenation and the replenishing of the aquifer. So that's probably an example of where that hierarchy of obligations actually gets put into practice in terms of economics and the health of that individual water body. But there's also opportunities for wetlands and really environmental activities that can help and support the Makoti aquifer and help to replenish it. And then later down the track when it's replenished, because I don't agree with using it for economics while it's at critical levels. That first putting the build-up of that water and then, I'm a bit lost in my words, it's hard to explain. But I hope you get the gist of it. Kia ora.
Thank you. Okay, councillors. Fabulous information report. Lots in there. Councillor Alder.
Thank you, Your Worship. A declaration. Oh, sorry, you were next.
No, he's not on my list yet. Thank you.
Declaration of I've irrigated from the TRI for 40 years and I'm a TRI farmer, but I do not extract water. I have no water right. The talk around the TRI, some of it concerns me and I'm looking forward to the workshop, particularly in relation to the longfin deal and the hornetfish, both of which I believe live in the upper reaches mostly. The thought of lifting the water level to 150 litres at Raised Bridge takes no account of the recharge that happens from Raised Bridge to the last extractor of water in the horticultural zone. 20 years ago, the farmers asked for a weir to be put in, and that showed that the water flow doubled over that stretch of water, despite them still taking water. I'd also, in those 40 years, say that the council has done an admirable job of looking after our waterways. When we got to critical levels, they turned our taps off. At no time was the TRI ever left to run dry, and there was always, to my knowledge, enough water left in there for Te Mana or Te Wai. Jumping right back to page 55, 170, and the summary of the report. And then from 170, you need to jump to page 347, which is the WGA's summary of their report. And I'd just like to read the underlined piece of 347. Third paragraph from the bottom, and it states, the overall model results indicate increased pumping up to the currently consented allocation limit does not present underlined a significant risk to the regional water supply security. So that is stated in their report, and yet if you look at our report, it reads and suggests critical. These comments in this our summary, our council summary, do nothing to give confidence to our farming community. There is no future in this council scaring existing and scaring off potential investment in intensive horticulture. An important part of the second report shows that the water is not used, if it's not used, it exits to the sea. And if you look at those graph bands, there's lots of recovery during the winter. And you mustn't forget that. And in times of wet years, we've obviously had some good recovery in the last couple of years, I would suggest. I'm not denying the importance of healthy water system, and this is a very complex set of reports. The interpretation of good science is paramount to good decisions. And our report, sorry Yannick, I find challenging. I think it uses emotive, subjective narrative, and the potential impact on our horticulture sector is a bad decision. The potential impact on our horticultural sector could be huge. We're talking about 1.2 million cubic metres of water, which, if you put it in the Waipoua River, it's 600 metres of the river is the size of dam we're talking about. So just no fear, we could solve this problem otherwise by other ways by building a dam and storing water for our very important horticultural sector. Thank you.
Okay, I've got Councillor Tupara, Councillor TW, it's JW, Josh Wharehinga, and then Councillor Tibble. Thank you.
Just an observation around the nature-based solution components of the report. Thank you very much for the report. Whether or not there's been consideration around the re-establishment or recharging of wetlands as a means to, the report focuses largely on aquifers, but whether or not wetlands could also play a part in the nature-based solution area. And on page 224, 3.2.3, habitat suitability criteria. I see in there the study is looking at and collecting data around particular species of animal that occupies the space. It doesn't include our native trout, kōkōpū, inanga, and our freshwater coda or freshwater shellfish, and whether or not that is because there is insufficient numbers of these organisms to sample, or whether or not my concern was perhaps they're not even present in those waterways to be sampled. And just a concern for myself on that, but understand these, particularly the shellfish organisms would give us a broader range of environmental impact if they were included in that. But I understand if they're not there, they simply aren't. Thank you.
Mr. Wharehinga.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I move the report and I look forward to our workshop in April. Thank you very much to staff for bringing this report to us. To make my position known and to draw a line in the sand, I support a minimum of 15% reduction of the take. I would expect that the information that comes back to us in the workshop starts there. We can't keep doing the status quo. I read these papers and as saying 15% will stabilise the aquifer, which means that more reduction is actually needed to replenish the aquifer. That's the information that I would like to see at our future workshop. I'm not interested in our economic development at the expense of our natural resources, which is what we have been doing in this region for far too long. Our economy needs to innovate. We can't solve our future problems with yesterday's thinking. We need to innovate. And if our economy can't do it, then maybe it's in a sunset position in regards to how they operate and what they're doing. It needs to get smarter because we've only got a finite amount of this resource in order to be able to generate our economic needs and region. Like I said earlier, I move this report and I look fully to discussing this in full as a council. Thank you very much, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Ria. Any more questions or queries? I have Councillor Tibble and then I have Councillor Cranston. Thank you.
Kia ora through you, Worship. I refer to 6.4 on page 247. My interest in this is I support Councillor Wharehinga and the 15% limitation of the water take, and I look forward to the workshop too. My interest is in the banded water allocation system, Yannick, that you talked about earlier in terms of Buka and Rainyaka in 2023. What does it tell us about its capacity in the end to be able to replenish our water supply?
Could I defer that question to one of the teams, one of the team members here?
Oh, thank you.
Can I just seek some clarification, please?
Councillor Tibble, can you just clarify your question, please?
How does the research by Buka and Rainyaka quoted in 2023 for the use of the banded water allocation system, how has it quoted where that's worked in other situations that is relevant in our locality?
The research quoted, how relevant is it to our specific situation?
I guess, yeah, if I can just, I guess it's worked well to date in terms of how it's been structured. I think what we're signalling now is that the A block has been fully allocated for some time now in terms of access to that reliable water that Yannick talked about at a low flow. I think eventually we'll run out of water in the B block, the high flow harvesting allocation band as well. So I think it's almost like a redesign to say what's appropriate for our rivers in terms of meeting Te Mano o Te Wai and the values associated with the rivers. And I think that's something we'd like to explore with the council as well, is to say, is continuing with the A block and the B block appropriate for us with where we want to head?
Thank you. Just a supplementary. Is that the only methodology that can be lent in at this point in time to be able to help us replenish that also meets what the hierarchical order of Te Mano o Te Wai's methodology states?
No, that's not the only method, and we're exploring some other methods around what's appropriate in terms of the operation of river flow for water allocation for irrigation purposes. Some of that science is still in development at the moment. But yeah, it's something we're watching closely. So yeah, there are pathways.
So at best, this is a trial test case to see if it will do what you expect it to do as a banded water allocation system.
Through you, Your Worship. Yes, I think so. And just further to Mr. Murphy's points, I guess the intention of the banded approach is really to try and restrict or manage the demand when it gets really, really close to that cutoff level. And so what the report's kind of suggesting is that it's a reasonable starting point for thinking about how you might be able to manage that demand, because the reality is all of the demand occurs within a time frame where the water isn't available. And so, that 3-month window is really that critical time where you do need to put in place that kind of regulatory approach. And the banded approach to managing fresh waters is commonly employed, I guess, as a way to restrict that demand. But, and this is something that we're acutely aware of in the policy team, is how do we address the equity component? Because the framework to date, I guess, has probably more lent towards efficiency and how we improve the efficiency of use, but not necessarily improving the equity of access. And that's something that we want to pursue and we want to explore. So all of the options, I think, need to be considered and discussed and workshopped before we move forwards.
Ngā mihi tēnā koe. Thank you, Yana.
Okay, last question, Councillor Cranston.
Yeah, not a question, just a bit of commentary around this. We've got plenty of water in this region. We've got heaps of it. As Councillor Order said, it's just going out to sea. So who is doing, or what are the responsibilities to look at storage, capturing that water and storing it? Councillor Order suggested a dam there, and perhaps that's the top of the cliff instead of the bottom cliff. Well, reduced reliability is the driver for this report, and we're all aware of what's happening there. So, yeah, storage, is that being looked at? And, are there opportunities out there? And that could be an economic opportunity for someone to get on top of water storage. The other thing is that I've noticed over the years that horticulture has introduced a lot more high water dependent crops. So have we got any ability to look at that and say, well, hang on, it's all okay if we grow this capacity of having water there, but then we've got an economic driver of crops that make more money, requiring more water, keeping us in the same place. Because suddenly we've got these crops that are just going to take that extra allocation. So there are a few things to look at there, which are kind of top of the cliff stuff rather than the bottom of the cliff, trying to work out how we allocate water when there is no water to be allocated. Interesting thing I saw from Neil was 3 25-degree days are a heat wave. In my day, that was 3 nice days. Okay, that's all.
Okay, I do have, you're showing your age.
Yeah.
I do have a mover and a seconder. I have Councillor Wharehinga who moved.
Is anyone looking at storage, or other than AUD? I mean, that seemed to be our backstop position.
Storage, yep.
Through you, Your Worship.
Capture and storage.
One of the things that we're really, really interested in doing, and we started this, I guess, in December by bringing our regional risk assessment to the table, is to bring the supply side into the space of, so we usually just focus on the regulatory demand management side of things. We know the challenges in front of us, we need to bring the supply side into focus as well. And so what we're hoping to do is to start a conversation around, okay, well, how do you take or harvest the water during the winter flows and bring it to when it's needed? This is a completely new space for us to explore and entertain, and I think this is what we'd like to talk about at our workshop. Say, okay, what does the regulatory framework look like? And what is the space for supply? And how can supply augment or mitigate some of the pressures on the regulatory regime? So if we impose a regulatory regime to give effect to Te Mana o Te Wai, then depending on where we go with that, could be a very strong push down on the current status quo. And that's what we're trying to head off at the pass. So I think it's really for us to consider and move forward on looking at both sides of those the aspects.
Thank you very much, Yannick and the science team, for this extensive report and the work that you guys are doing on our behalf. I also look forward to us having more in-depth discussions and bringing the voice from our communities to the table as well. I have a mover in Councillor Wharehinga, seconder in Councillor Ria, all in favour, 913 carried. And